Good morning and happy Friday. Today is the last day of Millionaire Mentor Week. If you've watched one, two, some or all of the videos this week, I just want to give you a big thank you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your questions. You've made this week really, really meaningful to me. And that's a word that I want to spend a little time on today. Today, the topic is money and turning money into a ritual, because I think what we're learning is that the untold secret of being a millionaire, of building millions of dollars worth of wealth, it all boils down to rituals. People that make millions and have millions, when you distill it down and funnel it down to what's at the very core of why, it's their habits. It's what they do differently as those habits and practices in their life. So that's why this week's been all about rituals, is to look at the rituals that I have in my life that I simply wanted to share with you, and adopt my rituals if they'll work for you, or create your own. But the bottom line is create rituals, powerful rituals, rituals for your health and well-being. First, take care of yourself first. Rituals for your relationships, putting your marriage especially as that number one most important relationship. And now the rituals about money and turning money into a ritual. Money's really important. But money's important in my world, not to buy shit, not for consumption, not to keep up with the Joneses. I think, we live in this American culture where that's just sort of built in. I think it's just a common sense that we have without knowing it should be or could be any other way. And so the way I like to think about money and the way I'm applying money to my own life and what's made such a big difference is when I changed my idea about money and to go in pursuit of money and then using money to buy things or to buy status, and I sort of flipped that over and totally created a new mindset and created a new relationship with money, to me, that's where my life totally changed and where now my life is so full of meaning. And it's because I use my money for meaning. I use my money now not to consume. In fact, I can't even tell you the last time I bought some new clothing or a new pair of shoes. I don't own any jewelry. I mean, I don't buy much. It's funny. Gary and I don't even really shop. So, and we make money. We make a decent amount of money. So where does the money go? Well, the money for us now, the way we think about money is not pursuit of money. I don't think of money in terms of income and expenses and budgeting and this idea of how do we keep all of this, inside of a budget, not go over budget. That's used to be the way I used to think, but now it's this total different way of, I guess, incorporating money into my life, into our life. And this is the way I think about it. I think in terms of income, of course, on the business side, revenue, income, but when it comes to personal life, I think of money as flow. Instead of thinking in, money out, income, expenses, I like to think about, first of all, my work. So what I do is I put my work out into the world. I create value. Hopefully my work makes impact. And by virtue of what I put out in the world, that's my outflow. I use my body, my mind, my creativity, my heart, my soul in my work, and I put it out there to the world. So that's outflow. And the inflow that comes as a thank you or in return for that, for somebody accepting that in return, is money. So outflow is me, I put out first. And then the inflow is the money I get in return for that. So the more value I put out in the world, the more that my work is wanted or needed or valued, then the more, let's say, income, but money comes in. But that's what I'm always thinking, is that exchange of what I put out in return for what I get back in. So do you see that flow? It's like energy, it's movement. And I'm always thinking that way, like what I put out and then what comes in. And can I change what I put out to change what comes in? But it's this movement, it's the flow, it's this constant. You want it to have this energy. So not about income and expenses anymore, but outflow and inflow, outflow and inflow. So that's putting my work out and then it coming back. Now, what do you do with the inflow that comes in? So don't think of it as income. It is income. But when you think about money and get away from some of these accounting terms we've been given and think about it of flowing in, I want us to change it to cash flow. So it's the flow of money. And when we can think of money as flow, then the question I want you to ask yourself is, where do I want my money to flow? What does it flow into? Do we want it to flow into things that have meaning, or do we want it to flow into things that don't necessarily have meaning? Do we want our beautiful river waters to flow into a beautiful forest, and to take the waters used really well to make trees and flowers and all the beautiful things? Or do we want it to flow into a swamp where it's just stagnant and that water, that flow doesn't do anything? So we flow our money into our lives, and that would show up. Usually we need a bank account or whatever, but when we flow it in, then we have all this flow of money that comes in as a result of the exchange of that flow we put out. So let's say in a month it sits there. So what do you do with that flow? Well, I can't really tell you here what to do, because I teach a 2-day course on cash flow and your money for a good life. But I'll give you just a real quick synopsis. Your money comes in, and then what you do is here's the formula for flowing your money. First off, you flow for your future self. The first piece is taxes. So Uncle Sam gets your first piece of your money flow out. So flow has come in. Now the first cash outflow is the IRS, is your taxes. The next money outflow goes to take care of your future self. Some people call it investments or for retirement. And again, technically, in accounting term wise, that's the case. But I want us to get away from these accounting terms, because when they have no meaning, it's hard to organize our lives around them, because it's just a term, and it's something maybe we're supposed to do, but we don't understand why, because it's just an accounting term. But when we're outflowing our money to the IRS, then we're outflowing some money towards our future self. And that's the piece, that's the money that's going to take care of you in the future, 10, 20, 30 years, 40, 50 years from now, whatever that time frame is. But that's the money that you need, that's set aside. It's in assets. They're building and growing over time. So that day that your future self wants or needs it and doesn't want to use their work to put out to get the inflow, but the assets that you've accumulated produce that money inflow, you have to take care of your future self first, because you have to take 10, 20, 30, 40 years to build that, to have enough for your future self. That future self will tell your current self, like, great job, thanks for taking care of me. Because we don't want to be poor and sick for our future self. Our future self will be very unhappy if we do that to them. So that's the second outflow. Then what we have is that you have your spending allowance. That's the money you get to spend. But that, again, this is a sum of money any given month, and that's your allowance, just like the allowance we give our kids. And we break that allowance up into a few different pieces. The first part's not our money, because that's Uncle Sam's money and our future self money, so we have to live off of everything else. And how do we outflow that money? Well, the formula is the first part where you outflow your money is towards your expenses, those must-pay expenses. I call them your ARM expenses. They're your annual required minimum expenses, meaning at the very minimum, you have to, this is how much money it costs to live your life every year, because you have to pay the mortgage, you have to pay the rent. If you have a car, you have to pay the car payment, you have to pay the utilities, you have to pay the insurance, you have to pay all those things, otherwise there's really a big consequence for not paying them. So that's pretty much a fixed amount any given month, because that's the fixed outflow. Those are called your ARM expenses. Now the second flow of expenses, this is where you really want to maybe take a close look at, because many of us have this outflow of expenses every single month, many times in recurring expenses that are what I call luxury expenses. These aren't required every single month. They're choice. You're choosing every month to go to Starbucks, to get your manis and petties, to buy the new pair of shoes at the Nordstrom shoe sale, to pay the cable bill, to go to have happy hours and dinner outs. And those are your outflows towards luxuries. Why? Because all that's luxury. Like, we don't need it to survive, and we usually don't really need it to live, moderately well. But we want to look at those, and when it's outflow for meaning, I want those luxuries to flow into things that have meaning in your life. Meaning, if the cable bill, because you're a sports fan and you love sports, and that's what gets you, that's one of your happy things, and you rally your friends around it, and it's a way for you to really relax and recover, then, and you can only get the sports like that on cable, then that would be meaningful in your life. So you would say, I'm going to keep the cable bill. But the cable bill is just there, and it has no real meaning. It's an easy way to sit on the couch after you get home and just flip channels and flip, and to catch a show here and there, whatever, but you just want cable because you want TV. Maybe that's not a lot of meaning. In fact, maybe it's the opposite. Maybe that habit of like plopping on the couch because you have this cable bill is robbing you of meaning you might be able to spend that time better elsewhere with a place with more meaning. So it's just my coaching is to look at those luxury expenses. I can't tell you the last time I bought some clothing. I don't wear jewelry. My hair is usually back most of the time, pretty simple. Why? Because I just realized that all that money outflow, that expense to buy stuff, didn't produce any meaning for me, and I actually had enough. So that's the luxury outflow. Now the third one is your savings outflow. And the concept that I like to teach is you spend to save. So we have a spending allowance, and most people say, well, I'll save when there's some money left over. And what we want to do, though, is we want to make our savings part of our spending. So every single month, you're spending a portion of your outflow. That outflow, you're flowing that out to savings buckets. And it's a whole bucketing system that I teach. Again, it's part of a 2-day course, so we can't go into that here. But there's different savings or these different buckets where you're flowing money into these buckets. And the visualization is you flow money to these buckets that they just fill with cash. And imagine just like cash overflowing out of these buckets. So that's your money. That's what our savings. Savings are for expenses, but they're future expenses. Your savings are sort of short-term future self-expenses. But we have to have these different savings. So what are some of these buckets that we outflow our money into? Well, one thing is we need a reserve. That's a reserve bucket. And it's just to make sure that if you lose your job, you get in a crash, something bad happens, that you have some money set aside for that future self to take care of you and your family in the event that something happens. It's like your self-insurance policy. You have car insurance that will cover you if catastrophe happens, so you don't have to pay a $20,000, $30,000 check for a new car if you didn't have insurance. Well, this is your self-insurance. That if something were to happen and you were to get in that same car crash and you lose your income for a few months, you're okay because you have that reserve. The next bucket is for education. It's for your kids' education. If you have children, you want to make sure you start filling that bucket. And for your own education. Why? Because we don't want to be in debt to send our kids to college, and we don't want them to be in debt for going to college. So we need to save. That's a whole other conversation. And our own education. The way that we remember the outflow of putting our mind, body, and spirit into our work, and in return we get our inflow of money. Well, with the education bucket, the way you increase the inflow is you're able to increase the outflow because you know more. You're always learning. You're always curious. You're always going to the conferences. You're always reading the books. You're always putting yourself in environments to learn, to improve your skill, to learn new skills, to stay valid, to stay valuable, highly valuable in the marketplace. So you can always be putting more out and getting more in. But you have to have money for education, and so that's the education bucket. The next bucket's your dream bucket, and that's where you flow money into that dream bucket. So Gary and I, for example, things we flow into our dream bucket. We're remodeling a house right now, and so we've saved for that, so it's all cash. No money goes on the Home Depot credit card. We take our dream vacations every year, and we save for that, and it's all cash, and we spend everything that we've put in our dream bucket for vacation every year. But that's how we afford vacations, is we flow money into that. Why? Because that dream bucket, that's about dream, it's about experience, it's about things we want to do for ourselves and our children, but it's all about experience, it's all about dreams, it's all about living. So we sacrifice that luxury flow, remember, like that buying stuff, that buying shit, so we have more money to funnel into our dreams, that's what's meaningful to Gary and me. So that's why we just fill that bucket with as much money as we can, so we can use that to go live, to go travel abroad, to take our kids places, to create meaningful moments. So that's the dream bucket. And then the final bucket is what I call the self-care bucket. I think if you've been following me all week, you probably have maybe been able to ascertain that there's a certain amount of money that as part of we flow into Gary and our health, just our wellness. And this isn't have money for health care, like our health insurance. This is self-care money. So means we can go get the doctor several times a year, or blood work, or massages, or I'm trying to think of different things that we can do. Maybe sometimes a spa might fit into that if that's really part of your recovery. But it's this self-care bucket so that you have the money to spend on yourself for your well-being. That's different than dreams and experiences, but it's having that money aside. So those are called the REDS buckets. And that's part of your flow. The outflow is every month you're flowing, you're spending or flowing your money into all of those buckets. And you just automate it and determine how much you'd want to put in any given one of those buckets every month. And then finally, the last outflow is debt reduction. So if you have debt, it's impossible to build wealth and to be wealthy and to have millions, any number of millions if you have debt. You cannot have personal debt and be rich and build wealth. So you have to have a system for paying that off. And I teach a whole system. It's called Get Out of Bed with Debt, a debt reduction system that amplifies your ability to get out of debt very quickly. But the key here is that you have to have a portion of outflow that amplifies and a system that's guaranteed to pay off that debt as quickly as possible so that you can use that amount of money to outflow somewhere else and probably into your buckets. So that's all about flow, and I hope that really helps you think about money differently. The final thing that I want to say is that you have to ritualize your money. In the next video, I'll take you behind the scenes of a conversation Gary and I have every single weekend where we look at our money, so you'll be able to see our ritual in action. But I also want to say with that is that hopefully maybe you've learned a new way to think about money in terms of flow, and just that you have a relationship with your money. Your money needs time and attention, just like any relationship does. To have a good marriage, to have a good relationship with your children, all relationships require time and attention and intention, actually, and so does money. So the ritual has to be a ritual and practice you put into your life that causes you to give your money attention, to create intention with your money, and to be able to just spend time with it. So that's why you need the ritual, to make sure that that happens, because that's what causes your money to grow. That's what causes you to flow your money and to be in these conversations. So Gary and I are in conversations about money all the time. So that's the final piece, is that you can't do money alone. If you're single, I want you to learn this flow so that you can apply it to your own life. And then as you bring someone else into your life, you can incorporate them to this. And I promise you, they'll be excited, because it's such a rich way to think about money and get over your hangups and just flow it to a great life, right? It's all about flow to a good life. And everybody can do it, no matter what your financial situation. If you follow the formula and put this to work, I promise you, within 12 to 24 months, your entire money life will be completely flipped over. But if you're married or if you're in a serious relationship with a significant other, this is really critical. You cannot do money alone. You have to do money with your spouse. You have to get on the same page, be in the same team, be in the money conversation together. And I teach a course, it's called Money and Marriage. Why? Because I want marriage to be a pillar. I want money to be a pillar of your marriage. Money can be the glue of your marriage versus what pulls you apart. Money can be the conversation that you're passionate about in a good way, and you look and you see it growing, and you see it supporting your life, and you see it flowing in all the places you want it to flow. You can, build communities or fund communities or whatever that flow you want out. But by doing it with your spouse, that's how you do it. If you two have different mindsets or argue or fight, and it actually some sort of pulls you apart, or you just don't talk about it at all because money's just off the table, it's going to be really, really hard to grow your wealth and to build it and to put that flow into action, to work, that really enables you to build your wealth, to have your millions, any number that you need to live the life you want. So make sure that you and your spouse start creating a ritual together to talk about this money thing, to figure it out and start flowing money into your life. All right, that's a long video. That's probably more than you ever wanted to know, but I hope you stuck with me, and I'll see you a little bit later when we take our conversation behind the scenes for the ritual that Gary and I practice on a weekly basis. Thanks a lot.